Hello Internet, this is Alex the Sudoku and it is Monday the 31st of August 2020. We have another medium New York Times Sudoku for you today with just a normal walkthrough with Snyder notations which should solve all the New York Times Sudokus. So the first thing first, I'm going to swap to candidates mode so that when I put in any numbers, it's going to go in candidate pencil mark mode. So first of all, we look at the numbers from 1 to 9 and see where they overlap, leaving us where the empty cells where they can go. And where we see two possible candidates, we'll pencil mark them in. If we see one candidate here, for instance here, since the 1 has to be in column 1 within this cage, it means no other column 1 cells can contain a 1 anymore in the other cages. So that forces a 1 in this cell. So when we have one candidate, we just put in the confirmed number. When we have two candidates, we pencil mark them in. So these two ones locks the columns, and that locks the row, giving us a pair of 1s there. But where we have more than two candidates, like here, we've got 5 possible candidates. We're not going to pencil mark them in based on Snyder notations. We're only going to pencil mark things in within a cage where we have 2 possible candidates. So here we have 3 possible candidates because these 2 rows are taken up, and therefore we're not going to pencil mark them in. And that's all the ones done, basically. There are only 2 cages where I can pencil mark them in 2 locations, so that's all we're going to do. So moving on to 2s, we can see the 2s, there are only 2 2s, and they lock 3 possible cells in this cage, so we're not going to pencil mark them in, but we're also going to look upwards with these 2s to see if they lock any cages with just 2 candidates left, and we haven't. So let's have a look at 3. So these 2 3s locks a pair, so we're going to put them in. These 2 3s also locks a pair of 3s over here. And I think that's all the interactions we are getting with the 3s. So let's move on to 4s then. So these 2 4s look up, and that 4 locks that cell, giving us another pair of 4s there. And this 4 and that 4 overlaps on these cells, or cover those cells in conjunction. So that gives us another pair of candidates. These 2 4s locks a 4 in this row, and the column in the middle has been taken, so that gives us another 2 candidates. And I think that is all the candidates we can put in. That's all the pairs we are gonna find. So 5s, these 2 5s locks a pair of 5s over there, and that actually creates an interesting property that I'm going to talk about in a second. But let's look at these 2 5s locking another pair of 5s over there, and I think that's all the basic interactions we have with 5s, but a bit more of a slightly intermediate or advanced technique. We've got 5s locked in columns 1s and 3s, and what I like to do is, I came horizontally to get the pencil marking in, so my instinct is always to look down. So if it creates a pointed pair, if I look across and find a pointed pair pointing downwards, I'm naturally going to go down, or if I can identify a confirmed number, I will look downwards if I came horizontally. But even if I get pencil markings that doesn't do that, it's always worth looking down anyway, because what I did find was the 5 is locked in column 1 and 3 in this cage. Or if you look at the bottom cage, the 5 has to be in columns 1s and 3 as well. So in these 2 cages, they have to be in columns 1 and 3, which means in the middle cage, it has to be on column 2, basically. So there has to be a 5 in one of these 2 cells. Another way of thinking about it, if you just look at the column itself, you find that there are only 3 possible cells where the 5 can go, but one of them is covered by the 5, so 5 has to go in these 2 cells. But the thing is, if I'm looking at a number at a time, I don't tend to scan the columns and rows automatically. What I do scan are the situations where I look at where they can exist, and in tandem with other cages where they can exist on the columns or sometimes the rows, and that gives me a deduction of where the number can go in the 3rd cage, basically. And in this case, it actually unlocks a 5 for us. So now, I hope that's useful. But yeah, using these 2 5s now, we can lock another 5 over here. And these 2 5s locks another pair of 5s down there. And I think that is now all the 5s I can pencil mark in. So let's move on to 6s. So 6s, these 2 6s interact in these 2 cells, giving us a pair of 6s there. And these pointed pair of 6s, they point in that direction, saying there are no 6s in these cells, because on this row, the 6 has to be within these cage, specifically within these 2 cells. So there are no 6s over here, 6 has to be in the middle row, in the middle cage, but we already got a 6 up there, so that confirms, a 6 in this cell. So now these 2 6s locks a 6 down here, but we already know where the 6 is, because we have a 6 over here. So therefore, 6 has to go there. But it also has another interesting property. We now actually know where the 4 goes. Well, actually, I suppose, yeah, I'm just going to put the 6 in first. That pushes the 5 out. I thought I had a bit of a clever logic there, because if I did pencil mark in the 6s, it creates a matching pair of 5s and 6s, because if the 5 goes in there, 6 has to go in there. And if the 6 goes in here, 5 has to go in there, because the two numbers share the same 2 cells as possible candidates. But and that would basically force any other numbers out of those 2 cells, forcing a 4 over there. But actually, we didn't even need to do that, because by placing the 6, we already erased one of the 5 as candidates, and that means the 5 has to be in the remaining cell, and that pushes out the 4, meaning we only have 1 candidate left for the 4. So those 3 cells have just resolved themselves. So now these 2 6s work in tandem with that 6, locking another 6 over here. And now these 2 6s work together and locks a pair of 6s up there, because row 2 is taken by the middle cage. And have we got anything else after that? I think that's all we can do with the 6s. So let's move on to 7s. Although before we do, let's have a quick look at the 5s and see if we can do anything with it. No, we can't. What about a 4? Ah, yes, the 4. These 2 4s work in tandem with that 4, locking another 4 in here, and that erases a pencil marking over there, giving us another 4. So that was useful. So that's, I think, most of the 4s done, but let's continue on. Oh yeah, these 2 4s also locks a 4 up here, and that erases another pencil marking, putting another 4 in here. So all the 4s are now done, and let's go back to where we were with the 6s. So I think we finished with the 6s, but we've kind of changed the board a little bit, so let's see if that has an impact at all. And indeed it does, because that 6 sees into that column, that 6 sees that cell, so the 6s are locked in these 2 cells, and that's all the pencil markings we can do for 6s. 7s, we don't actually have a 7 on the board, so what we do know is 7 has to go in one of these 2 cells, because we have a pair on this column, and they basically are interchangeable. Well, they are sharing the cells with the 6s, forming a matching pair of 6 and 7s. But we're not going to pencil mark them in, because with Snyder notation, if we're disciplined, then we're only going to pencil mark in candidates in cages. Cages being a grid of 9, and not in columns, basically, because it may confuse us later. By pencil marking a 7, if we look in a cage in the future, we may think there's only 1 7 left and assume that that's a 7, when in actuality 7s can still go in any of the other cells. So with that in mind, let's move on to 8s. And 8, these 2 8s locks a pair of 8s over there. And so we have another situation where I've got a pair of 8s on the outside columns with column 4 and 6. 4 and 6. So that means one of the 8s has to be in this column. But we don't know where it is just yet. We can't even limit it to 2 candidates at the moment. So it's just something to bear in mind. I know some people do variants of the Snyder notation in which they would actually pencil mark in the 3 8s, but I'm choosing not to do that at the moment. Hopefully it's not going to impede me going forward. But I think that's all we can do with the 8s. So let's have a look at 9s. Well, this 9 and that 9 locks another 9 in there, which unlocks a 3 for us. So can we do anything with the 3? 3, 3. Well, these two 3s. Hang on. That 3. Yeah, these two 3s actually gives me a pair of pointed 3s over there. So that takes out those two cells. And that 3 sees that cell, so we actually have a pair of 3s there. Not as a result of placing that 3. So let's carry on with the 9s then. So these two 9s locks a pair of 9s over there. These two 9s locks a pair of 9s over here. These two 9s locks a single 9 in this column. So that 9 can no longer be possible, so 9 has to be here, which means 3 has to go there now. So has that changed what we can do with the 3s? No, it hasn't. So what about the 9s? Have we got any new developments? Not really, we still have 3 candidates over there, but these two 9s locks another pair of 9s over here. So I think that's all the pencil markings in we can do with the 9s in this case. So we've done a fair bit on the grid. We can continue on to go around from 1 to 9 and see if we can do any more pencil markings, but what we're going to do instead is we are going to look at the weak areas around the board to see if we can actually find any confirmed digits. And I think it's slightly tricky at the moment because we have no 7s on the board at all, so that is going to complicate things a little bit. So for instance, we have a weak area here, and we know that one of them is going to be a 7 and the other one is a 2, but we can't see any 2s within the cages or the columns of the two cells that we can see, so we can't deduce whether that's a 2 or 7. We have 2s and 7s in here as well, which creates an interesting property because we just locked a pair of 2s and 7s in these two cells. So in that case, we are going to pencil mark them in, and that forms a really interesting relationship because this 2 basically locks a 2 in this column, and if the 2 is in this column within that cage, that means no 2 is basically a pointed triple. The 2 cannot be in column 8 anywhere else, so we have actually reduced these two cells into the 2s and 7s, and with that we can resolve the 2 and the 7s in these 4 cells just by looking at the weak areas basically. So now these cells are left as 2s and 6s, but we see a 2, so 2 and 6 are resolvable. These are 8s and 7s, but we don't know where the 7s are yet, so we are going to pencil mark them in because they're within the same cage. And finally over here we've got 1, 3 and 9, but we can't see the 1s or the 9s on the columns, so that's going to give us 3 candidates for both 1 and 9. So for now let's just leave them alone and look at the other cells, the other weak areas. Well, this weak area has been, that 6 shouldn't have been there because when I confirm the 6 over here, that erases the pencil marking. So I've just erased the pencil marking. Let's look at the other candidate within a cage, because with Snyder notation, that always means the remaining cell, the remaining candidate has to be correct. So that forces a 6 in there, that deletes a 1 and 5 as well. So that means there's only one candidate for 1, one candidate for 5. And now we can do some more pencil markings, I suppose, but also we can tackle this weak area. We only have one cell left, and it has to be a 7 in this case. So what else can we do? Well, these two 7s locks a pair of 7s over there, and the remaining cells are 5s and 8s, but we can't resolve them just yet, so let's pencil mark them in. What about these two? These are 2s and 8s as well, so let's pencil them in. What else have we got that are weak? I think we've run out of pairs now, so we can look at triples now instead. So these 3 cells forms a triple in the sense that we've got 3 cells left and 3 candidates left. And they have to be 2, 6 and 8. Just a quick tip, if you have 3 cells left in a row or column, just look at the pencil markings and see. So I see a 2 there, check the row, I can't see any more 2s. 6, check the row, there are no 6s. 8, check the row, there are no 8s. So it's just a quick way of knowing that, first of all, if they are on the row, it means you haven't cleaned the candidates, and you may, well, if you have to clean a candidate, it means you've just unlocked another number, confirmed another number. If you haven't, then these 3 numbers have to go in these 3 cells, and you've worked out what the triples are. So they are 2, 6 and 8. And what's useful is when we look up and down, this column has 2s and 6s, and that means the 8 has to go in there, which unlocks the 8 and the 2 in these 2 cells. So now we know that has to be a 6. And can we do anything with that? No, that is the last 6 that is in play. So we've done a lot. Let's see, what else can we do? Well, we can pencil mark. Actually, this 2 looks into these 3 cells, and I got a pair of 2s on the row, so that actually resolves the 2 and the 1. And let's see, that's also a 7 and 8, because if that's a 7 and 8 and I can't see them on the column, that has to be a 7, 8 pair. But I'm not going to pencil mark them in just yet, because I think, let's see, although actually I know the 8s have to go in this row because of these 2 8s, but 7 can go in any of these 3 cells, so I'm not going to pencil mark them in just yet. What about 2s? Well, 2 can't go in this cell because of that 2, so 2 has to go in there, and we still have 7s to go, so we can't deduce those numbers just yet. Let's see, we have 2, 9 and 7, so we've got a 7 here, we've got a 2 there, so we can't resolve this triple yet either. I think it is probably easier to just focus on pencil marking still, but I just like to try and attack the weak areas, because I think that's what strengthens your techniques in solving Sudokus. So we have another triple here, which are 1s, 7s and 9s. Well, we've got 7 in this cage looking into that cell, so the 7s will have to go in these 2 cells. These 2 cells both see 9s, and these 2 cells both see 1s, so we can't resolve the 179 triple just yet. In fact, we have a 139 triple there as well, which are also not resolvable just yet, so that's quite disappointing actually. I think what we may be better off doing is to try and resolve, so that 5 there actually would have resolved the pencil marking over here, so that's just me lapsing in concentration. So this 5 resolves that pencil marking 5, and I think that's sort of 5s. Does this 8 do anything for us? It does indeed, because it locks a pair of 8s there, but also working with that 8 over here and these 2 8s, it locks a pointer pair of 8s in this row. Well, in fact, I've got an 8 there as well, so it actually confirms an 8, which takes out the pencil marking, giving us another 8. But we can't resolve the remaining 8s just yet. We are now left with 3s and 7s in these 2 cells. Well, I don't know if you remember what I mentioned early on in the puzzle, but basically we have a pair of 7s locked in rows 8 and 9, and over here we've got 8 and 9 where 7 can go. And how did we deduce that? Oh, we deduced that because of the column, and based on that logic, the 7 has to go in row number 7 in the other cage. So the 7 and 3 are now resolved, which in turn resolves the 7 and 3 over there, which in turn resolves the 9 and the 7 over here. That's no longer a 7, and instead it is now a single digit on the on the row even, so it has to be a 1, and the last digit in this cage is a 3, so that resolves another 3 first, and that's all the 3's done. So this is now a single digit left on the column, and it is a 9, I believe. So that's a 9, that has to be the 1, and that 1 looks up along with that one, locks a 1 over there. There was a pencil marking of 6 that I didn't clean up early on. This 9 also cleans that pencil marking of 9, so we know that has to be a 9. So we are now left with a 7 on this column and a 2 in this cell, which unlocks the 2 and the 8, and that now has to be a 7, which resolves the 7 and the 8 over there as well. So that is today's how we solve today's medium New York Times Sudoku using just Snyder notations and just a little bit of techniques to attack the weak areas, basically. I hope it's been useful. If it has helped you at all, please like, and if you want to see more regular videos to help you improve, please subscribe, and I shall see you tomorrow. Bye!